Welcome, everybody, to a brand new episode of IDTALK for Educators Live, the show for the unsung heroes of education. I'm your host, Sarfo-Mensah. And if this is your first time tuning in to this podcast, I welcome you and hope that today's episode is one that will allow you to come back for more episodes to watch because we have so many that you need to watch in the future and more that you have to catch up on. We're approaching 160 episodes, so the catalog continues to grow. And if you're a returning listener or viewer of the podcast, as always, thank you for the support. I welcome you back and I hope that today's episode is one that you find informative, enlightening, and as always, insightful. So before we get into the main event, just a reminder for our people on YouTube, please hit that red subscribe button to get future notifications on new episodes. And if you're listening from Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure you subscribe there as well. And also, for those who would like to help us continue growing this platform through donation, we do accept donations through Cash App using the handle money sign ID Talk 4Ed. So money sign as in dollar sign for those who are in the States. And then for those who are on Venmo, we have our handle at symbol Kwame SM. That's KWAMESM. And to catch up on new and past episodes of the podcast, you can go to our main website at identitytalkforeducators.com, or you can simply go to our YouTube channel, which is under my name, Kwame Sarfo-Mensah. As always, thank you all for the support. I don't take it for granted. So, people, today's episode is one that I am excited about. It's one that really hits the soul for me. I'll tell you a short story of what led to me wanting to interview today's guest. So, I'm browsing on the internet, probably was on LinkedIn or Twitter somewhere, and I just came across this pink book, and all I saw were the words humans who teach. And I'm like, yes, I so agree with that. In order to teach, you must be human. But then I thought to myself, well, gee, it says humans who teach, which then leads to the impression that there may be some humans within our schools who don't always act human towards students, but yet they do hold teaching positions. I agree with that as well. But either way, the title left me intrigued enough to want to dig deeper and learn more about the author of this book, who is our guest for tonight. And he happens to be someone who's been an educator for many years. He's currently a professor. He's also someone who is a lover. He is someone who's a liberator. He is many things, but I'm going to leave it for him to explain to us tonight. So without further ado, I want to bring on today's guest, Dr. Shamari K.Reid, to the podcast to talk with us about his journey and this new book, Humans Who Teach. So let's bring the good doc on for this conversation. Yes, sir.
Kwame, thank you so much for that introduction. It's like, yeah, we're humans, love, and all of the things. Let me also congratulate you for getting close to 160 episodes. I know it's not. I had a podcast. I have a podcast. It's a lot of hard work. And so I respect so much the work that you do. I appreciate you inviting me on to share space. And here's to 160 more.
I appreciate it, Shamar. I appreciate it. It's, as you know, it's not easy work. It takes a lot of dedication, a lot of commitment, a lot of consistency in order to get to that number. So I'm extremely blessed and thankful to continue to have this platform, which only works when the guests come on and share their stories. I just provide a platform. You all do the work and show off the magic. So I appreciate every guest, including yourself, who comes on here to share their story and even be vulnerable at times, because I know it's not always easy to
That's
be
right.
that open
That's right.
to a whole bunch of strangers, mostly strangers watching
That's
and
right.
listening.
We appreciate you for opening up the space.
Yes. So Doc, we have a lot of questions we need to get through.
Sure.
I want to start with this question. Um, because I'm just thinking about the title of your book. You said humans who teach.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in knowing from you, in your words, what does it mean to be human?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be within an educator context, but just
Sure. Sure.
in your own view.
That's right. I mean, so what a complicated word. Can we just talk about that? This idea of
Sure.
human, and I think we use it a lot, but I don't know if we always agree and or understand it in the same way. And so across the book, what I'm doing is I'm exploring all of the contradictions, because for me, what it means to be human is to make space for contradiction. It's to make space for challenge and joy, for love and hate. It is to make space for nuance and for the gray area. And so the way I understand humanity, at least my own humanity, is embracing the imperfect, the messy, the ambiguous, the unclear, the contradictory, the complicated. All of that is wrapped up in our humanity. And I think the more we understand that and the closer we get to that, the better we are positioned to share space in ways that are beautiful and loving with all the other humans. But it does require us to get into some of that messiness and those imperfections, and not to romanticize the human, and not to romanticize humanity. It is a series of contradictions, and it's extremely, extremely complicated, and at times hurtful and harmful, and at times beautiful and joyous.
Yeah, and when you talk about contradictions, I just think about the very education system that we both work under. So in my case, I was a middle school math teacher for many years, in both Philadelphia and Boston before moving abroad with my family.
Okay.
And I know what it was like to be in those trenches. We're thinking to ourselves, the work that we do as teachers is humanity work,
That's right.
but then we're within systems that are very much inhumane.
That's right.
When you think about the types of procedures and protocols that we're expecting students to adhere to, and teachers as well, even what's currently happening socio-politically within the states and even across the globe. When you think
Sure,
about just book bans, anti-trans legislation, the list goes on and on.
sure.
So I'm just thinking about all that's happening, and I'm wondering, as someone that was once in the trenches like I was, and you're
Mhm.
now in academia, I want you to think back to when you were in the classroom. How were you able to even stay within the classroom, knowing that it's a system that is as inhumane as
Sure.
we've just mentioned?
Sure. Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. And I appreciate us get into the heart of this thing and get
Yeah.
into the grimy and the gritty parts of it. And the reality that it is an inhumane system. And in many ways, it's also dehumanizing, right? And so, what does it mean to embrace humanity and to do work that's humanizing in spaces that are meant to dehumanize? And so, how did I stay? Because of my human ability to love. And that's what I talk about across the book, is how powerful love can be as not only a source of information and knowledge, but also as a way to sustain ourselves in work that works really hard to sort of destabilize us and to dehumanize us. And so the love I have for my people, the love I have for myself, and the love I have for young people is what I often go back to when I arrived at the end of my teaching days and I was tired, or I was exhausted, or I was feeling uninspired or unmotivated, and maybe asking myself, perhaps many of you have asked yourself, does anything I do matter? Did anything I say today actually matter? Am I actually contributing toward the world we all deserve? Or am I just another pawn, another peg in the machine? And so when I asked myself those questions, I always answered with, yes, it matters, because love always matters. And if we are serious in moving forward, we're going to have to go to the thing that we know can guarantee world building and can guarantee sustaining cultures and people and futures, which is love. When I think about why you and I are here, Kwame, why are we here? It's because our ancestors loved us enough and loved themselves enough, and they loved us into the future. And so I know it works. We know it works.
Yes.
Amidst oppression and amidst violence and destruction, love has always been powerful enough, man, to carry us through. And so that is how I sustained myself, fed myself, watered myself as I was working as a human who teaches in public schools.
Man, come on, brother, preach on, man. Listen, we're going to get deeper into that, but let's go back. So
Sure.
I want you to think back to when you were going through your K-12 schooling.
Yeah.
Right? We understand what that was like back then.
Yeah.
And
it ain't too far back now. It
ain't too far back. Okay.
It's back, but
All
it ain't
right.
too far back.
But it's back enough.
It's
but
back
anyway,
enough.
Thinking about that schooling, right? And thinking about what went on during that time, I want you to just reflect on that for a second and tell us what were some of the struggles, whether they be internal or external, that you had with embracing your identity and being able to show up fully
Sure.
as who you are, right?
Sure.
So talk to us about that.
Yeah, and to go back to my initial answer about, being human, the answer to this question is very complicated. And what I'm about to say is probably going to feel like a contradiction, but that is so much of what it means to be alive and to be human, is to navigate the contradiction. So on one hand, when I think about my experiences in K-12, what sustained me and what sustains me now was my community. It was Black people. It was being able to sort of be raised and segregated part of the Southwest, surrounded by Black people who looked like me, who were brilliant, who believed in me. So that is where I sort of drew inspiration. Now, the contradiction, I get into schools and the world I had come to know, a Black world, a beautifully brilliant, resilient Black world, was not the one being reflected back to me in schools. And so I found myself in my early years not understanding how the teachers could tell stories that didn't make sense or didn't align with the story my mama told me. And so the thing that sustained me also produced a lot of double consciousness. We can talk about sort of schizophrenia, where I'm just like, but the world I know at home, the world that loves me and that sustains me, is not the same world these teachers are trying to teach me about. And so something's wrong. Either they're wrong and they're making this up, or my community is wrong and they're making it up. And so I, for a very long time, was trying to figure out which was right and what to do. And so a lot of my K-12 struggles came about because there were contradicting stories about who Black people were, who we had been, and who we could be. My community was saying, you can be everything, Black boy. And the schools were saying, know your place, Black boy, you can't be anything. And so I was trying to forge an identity in that space, trying to figure out who the hell I was. And then you add that I was a Black queer person, which I knew very, very early on. It made it even more complicated and even more of a contradiction. And thinking about it now, I'm just like, whoo, what hard work to put on a 5-year-old. What a hard task to put on an 8-year-old. And so I think that's how we talk about now the relevance piece around culture, or the responsiveness, right? And the sustaining piece. It's not just a buzzword. It is trying to match the worlds that specifically Black and brown students grow up in with the worlds that they're being asked to learn about and learn through and from in schools. When those worlds match, the learning process can be joyous. When those worlds contradict, it can produce all kinds of identity challenges in you, because you're learning to think about your communities in ways that don't even make sense with how you were brought up or how you were raised. And so that is a complicated answer to what was K-12 like for me and what were the struggles internally and externally. It was trying to find a balance between the world that schools taught me about and the worlds that I learned about from my community of Black people.
Yeah, and I think it's complicated because growing up, we are given these different ideas and concepts that we just inherit without interrogating. And then when we get to a certain level of consciousness, or a certain age,
Yeah.
then we start to peel the layers
That's right.
of what was really going on back then. And then you're having these epiphanies like, what? How did I
Yeah.
allow this to happen?
That's right. That's right.
Like, I didn't even realize how problematic that was. It
That's
was
right.
so subtle and it was so normative. I just thought this is what everybody did. And I
Mhm.
think maybe this wasn't the case for you. I'm assuming it was, but I know for me, I grew up with teachers who are kind for the most part.
Mhm.
They love what they did. And you thought to yourself, you're going to work in this same school for 25, 30 years. We had those kind of teachers that just stayed in the
Mhm.
same school and
Mhm.
taught multiple generations of families
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
many decades. That's how it was, at least when I was growing up. And then once NCLB came in during second Bush administration,
Sure.
that all changed. And that's
Yeah.
when I became a teacher. It was around that time when NCLB was very much the hot topic.
That's right.
Um, it wasn't about having that longevity in your classroom or school community. It was about the metrics. It was
That's exactly
about
right.
getting the test scores, getting your licensure, being highly qualified
That's right.
based on those metrics, not
That's,
even based on performance, based on just how you tested.
that's right.
That was the environment that I came into as an educator. So when I think about what you were saying in some of your previous interviews, right, about how we overwork ourselves as educators,
Yeah.
I kept thinking about this term, um, this idea of professional mobility. Because I
Mm.
think when you look at our schools, if you work in a district, it's all about the amount of work that you put in relation to how much you're supposed to get paid,
That's
like the
right.
pays.
That's right.
So in this case, if I get more degrees, I can get more pay, or at least I can expedite how fast I go up the
Sure.
scale,
Sure.
salary wise. If I end up taking this many professional development courses within my district, that will
Mhm.
also expedite how fast I can get up to the pay scale.
Mhm.
You're in academia, so I don't know if you're in a tenure track, but you got to write peer review articles and
Yeah.
publications.
Yeah.
The
Yeah. Yeah.
more of those you publish, the stronger your chances are of becoming tenured within your university.
Sure.
So a lot of these ideas are rooted in this idea of meritocracy,
That's right.
which we know is very much a flawed concept.
That's right.
And that's a whole nother
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah.
But I want to know, when you think about self-care, which you talk about a lot,
Mm-hmm.
how do you manage that within what I just described in
Sure.
these different contexts, whether we're talking academia or just school
That's right.
districts we used to work in?
That's right. I think this is a powerful question, and I appreciate it. And I think it's complicated. And before I answer it, and we can talk about self-care and how I manage taking care of myself in a system that requires more than I can give, and in a system of capitalism that tells
Yes.
me that my value is only sort of tied to how much I can produce. Before we get there, I gotta take us to self-regard.
Okay.
Because
Let's
when
do
we
it.
think about self-regard, and I'm drawing on Toni Morrison here, right? And so anyone who knows me will understand my love for Toni Morrison runs deep, because in many ways she freed me from myself, and she freed me
Mhm.
from societal expectations grounded in whiteness of Black people. And so what I've learned from Toni Morrison about self-regard, and if those of you who have the book, chapter 2 is a real deep dive into all of this, but really quick here, it's about how we see ourselves and how we regard ourselves internally, and is not tied to anything external or extrinsic. Meaning, my value as a human, my value as a person is not tied to how much money I make. It is not tied to how much I do. It is not tied to how many students perform well on X, Y, and Z exams. My value as a person comes from how I feel about myself. And when you have a healthy sense of self-regard, you regard yourself as valuable no matter what you do or don't do. Every day you wake up and you think of yourself and you say to Shamari in the mirror, or, Kwame, you say to yourself, I matter and I'm valuable because I'm here. I don't have to do anything for that inherent value that I already have. And so when you think of it like that, self-care naturally flows because we take care of the things that we regard positively. Think about the things in your life that perhaps you own, spent a lot of money on, or people that you really value. You're going to care for it. I think about growing up in the South and going to my grandparents' house, and they had that living room you couldn't sit in, right? They had that plastic over it, and you couldn't touch it, right? You know what I'm talking about? You get it. And so it was valuable to them, and so you couldn't mess with it. They regarded it highly. They regarded it positively until they took care of it. And what I'm saying is, I got that plastic over me, and I'm regarding myself as highly, taking care of myself. And that is what's more important to me than how productive I am or how able or not I am to move through. You said professional mobility. None of that matters if I am not well. I got to take care of myself first because I have a healthy sense of self-regard. So how have I sustained myself as I move through K-12 and into academia, where they are telling me publish more articles, write more books, give more talks? Everybody around me is demanding me to do more and more and more. And so self-care comes in where I'm just like, now hold on. My value and my worth is not tied to how many articles I write for you. It's not tied to how much money I make. I'm always valuable and I care for the things that I value. And so self-care then turns into a question around how am I making sure that I can stay here on earth as long as possible in ways that are healthy and loving as possible. And so now to get to your question about self-care, the first thing I had to understand was self-care was not overindulgence. And the way that I had been taught self-care, Kwame, was like, hey, after a hard day, have a few drinks. After a hard day, I like cookies. I like sweets, y'all. After a hard day, eat some cookies and brownies. And I used to do that after my teaching days and be like, this makes me feel good. This is self-care. And I really did think that self-care was overindulgence. But after realizing about self-regard, I was like, how are those brownies caring for my body? What are those brownies doing to me? And I used to eat more than one. I ain't talking about an occasional treat. I'm talking about a pan of brownies. And I used to tell myself, wow, look at the self-care, look at the joy. But the truth is, I was destroying myself. So self-care for me now is, how am I caring for myself physically, like my body, which I think of as my instrument. And I think of our bodies as the things that we use to realize dreams and carry out tasks. Caring for my body, what is that? Emotionally, which I think of as a place you cannot see within us, but that emotional place is what provides your thoughts and your ideas. The healthier that emotional space is, the healthier your ideas are, the healthier your thoughts are. And those thoughts and ideas are what direct your body. So if you got healthy thoughts and healthy ideas, you're giving your body healthy instructions. If you don't take care of your emotional or your mental, you're giving flawed and toxic ideas and thoughts to your body, and you're carrying out toxic ideas, and you're realizing toxic dreams. And then the third piece of that, it's physical, emotional, and spiritual, which for me is about joy. So if I think of our physical heart as pumping blood, spirit for me pumps joy, energy, and motivation. And that's what fuels the body. So I got to keep my joy meter full, which for me is music, Toni Morrison, hanging out with my friends, going out. That's what keeps my joy meter up. So that is now how I think about self-care. As I've moved from overindulgence, I've moved away from only caring for myself or rewarding myself when I publish an article. And now self-care is, Shamari, how are you making sure you'll be here tomorrow with a healthy body, with a healthy mind, and a healthy heart?
Now, do you believe that one can gain self-regard from their students?
Sure. I think sure. To answer your question, I think we can draw regard from everywhere and from anything, including our students, including our work. However, as I talk about in the book, I would interrupt that idea because that can often lead into savior complexes, and that can
Yes.
often lead into superhero mentalities, where
Mm.
you are working more than your 40 hours a week you get paid. You're given 80 hours, and you're going and you're going and you're lesson planning and you're grading and you're talking to parents, and you're not sleeping, you're not eating. You're not eating well, excuse me. You're not taking care of yourself. You have no social life, and you are burning yourself out. And so Toni Morrison advises and cautions, and I'll do so in the book, be careful when your self-regard comes from anything that's not the self. You have to
Okay.
regard yourself as human and whole. And once you are whole, overflowing with love, that's what you get to people you love, like young people. And so every day I show up to school, I got me. Shamari is full of love. I'm full of joy. I'm full of peace. And I let that pour out onto everybody in my life, including the young people that I have the privilege and the honor of getting to share space with and getting to teach. But I had to switch that because that burnout was real at first. And I was a superhero trying to save, I was trying to rescue. And the truth is, once you understand these systems, as you talked about, we ain't going to outwork these systems. You're not going 60, 80-hour year week out of anti-Blackness. You're not going to work 80 hours out of transphobia, unfortunately. So that means you're going to have to fortify yourself so we can do the real work of dismantling. But dismantling requires healthy whole bodies, y'all, because that work is hard, it's trying, and it is exhausting. And so we've got to be well. And somebody I know, and this last thing I'll say, somebody I know who I care about a lot always tells me, Shamari, if you care about the work, and let's say it's teaching, for example, if you care about the work, show up to it whole. Don't show up to anything you care about and you love empty. Give it your best. Give it your all, which means and requires that I take care of myself, because students deserve me at my best, not at my worst, not when I'm frustrated, not when I'm tired, not when I'm easily irritated, so I'm snapping on them when they ask me to repeat, or I'm snapping when they ask a very valid question. But when I'm whole and I'm peaceful and I'm loving and I'm joyful, that's the place I teach from.
Man, so many great points, man. And I have a few things I want to respond to. I think number one, when you say that self-care is overindulgence, I also believe that overindulgence can be a manifestation of trauma that you're
Sure.
experiencing in the workplace as well.
That's right.
One perfect example is happy hours. Teachers,
Yeah.
we love happy hours,
We
right?
love happy hour.
Man, Friday or
Yep.
Thursday come, payday come, turn up, right? Let's go to
Yep.
the bar.
Yep.
Let's get us around.
A
You know what
few
I mean?
rounds.
Let's talk ish about our administrators or
That's right.
colleagues and gossip and do all this stuff.
Yeah.
But what we're doing is we're not only emoting, but we're also letting people know, like, yo, I'm hurt.
That's right.
And I don't know how to communicate or express that other than through drunken conversation.
That's right. That's
You
right.
know, now I didn't come to this realization back then, but
That's right.
over time you realize, yeah, probably shouldn't have said some of these things.
That's right.
Now, when I asked the question about self-regard being tied to our students, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about this idea in this regard, pun intended. Um, so we know that as teachers, we get evaluated or observed X
Sure.
amount of times throughout the year. And sometimes the principal or our instructional coach might come into our classroom and we might not be at our best.
Mm-hmm.
Something may have happened that day.
Mm-hmm.
Or they just caught us at a bad time because they're not there every day. They're
That's
there
right.
maybe 10, maybe 5 to 10 days out of an 180-day school
Sure.
year. If we're
Sure.
going to be realistic.
Sure.
So I was thinking about self-regard in the sense that, you know what? This evaluation is not going to define me. The students are my rep.
Yep.
When that student comes back to me 5 years later, 10 years later, with their
Yep.
son, with their daughter, and they're saying, hey, Mr. Sarfo-Mensah, because of you, I'm able to be a good father. I'm able to be an excellent mother.
Sure.
I'm thriving in my career because of the words that you instilled in me X
Yep.
amount of years ago.
Yeah.
Like, that helps build your self-regard because if anything, it affirms the self-regard. So I was thinking about it in that
Sure.
light. I do like what you said about the savior complex, which is very true.
Yeah,
And I think at some points in our careers, we both been guilty of that
of
in
course,
some shape
of
or
course.
form. Like,
The beginning half of my career, I was obsessed, man. I was obsessed with trying to help people get out the hood. I was obsessed with trying to help people overcome barriers. And as Black men, in many ways, that's how we're positioned. I was told when I was going through, education program, you are the savior. Wow, we need more Black men in teaching. Shamari's gonna come and he gonna fix it. Put him in a school and he can do everything. And that's how they burn us out as well, because they put things on us. Well, first of all, it's just too much. And also, they give us this flawed understanding that my teaching is enough to undo a system of anti-Blackness that I did not create. And so I had to really unlearn. I can love and I can show up and I can work hard. However, assuming that students are going to just overcome these barriers that are big and massive without any systemic change is dangerous. Because what happens, and we start blaming ourselves and we start blaming students when they cannot overcome anti-Blackness. And we'll be like, wow, I didn't work hard enough, or he didn't work hard enough. And I'm like, are you serious? The barrier was created to get in both of our way. It's going to take some real strategic work, which we are doing, by the way, but it's going to take a more than just a good lesson to overcome real barriers. And if we don't talk about that, we're going to continue to burn teachers out, which is why a lot of new teachers are not making it past year 3 right now. That is a problem, because they're getting in here with these big dreams and these big ideas, and they're going to save everybody. And then by year 3, they're burnt out, they're tired, they're exhausted. They're doing happy hour not only on Fridays, they're doing happy hour every day to cope, to your point, because they've been traumatized and they've been hurt and they've been violated in so many ways. And then we're wondering why we don't shift and we don't move or we don't go anywhere. It's like, we're going to have to do a yes and. Yes, teach well. Yes, teach lovingly. And we make sure we're working to dismantle other systemic barriers. It's not going to just fall on the work of teaching. I think that's unfair to teachers. That's unfair to educators. And it puts all the work on one institution when really it'll take all of us in collaboration with each other to actually move this thing.
so this season, Identity Talk for Educators Live will be including ad spots for businesses, products, and events that are adding significant value to their communities. And here's the catch: you don't have to be an educator or an education-based business to be a part of this. We're looking for people who are just doing great work in the community, and we want to use our platform as a way to amplify their work. So if you are an entrepreneur or you know of an entrepreneur who is doing just that, bring them in our direction. Have them reach out to us. If they want to learn more about their ad spots and how they can get themselves promoted on this platform, they can contact myself, Kwame at identitytalkforeducators.com. I'll say it one more time. It is Kwame at identitytalkforeducators.com. Hope to hear from you, and let's keep on amplifying our work and building each other up. And this is a perfect segue into the next question. I want to stay here because first off, I want to make sure that we shout out a North Star, both of ours, Dr. Yolanda Silly Ruiz. Shout out to her.
Yes.
Sister Yolanda, I've had her on my podcast, and whenever she speaks, she's so captivating.
Yeah.
Like, her speech is love every time.
That's right.
I could listen to her speak all day. And her work has had a major influence and has shifted my idea of what an educator is supposed to be. We think about the archaeology of the self. We think about just the racial literacy development framework that she talks about. One of the things that she mentions is, in order for us to get to the point of interruption, we have to go through these stages, right? Critical love, critical humility, all these different things. But I want to talk about interruption for a second, because your book, one of the questions that you talk about is around interruption.
That's right.
So you are pushing teachers to inquire about how their practice interrupts the ideas,
that's right,
people that threaten the humanity of students and etc. Right?
Right.
Now, it's a very important question,
Sure.
but let's also think about the current context we're in. There's a lot of scary things going on, Shamari,
Terrifying.
a lot of scary things going on.
Yeah.
And you and I both know when we think about liberatory work,
Sure.
it's risky.
Yeah.
Because if you're making the right move that you know is the right move for your students,
Yeah.
a right move towards humanity as we know it,
Sure.
that could jeopardize your career.
That's exactly right.
We've seen many examples of that.
That's right.
So my question for you is this. What's your relationship with fear within this context of liberatory education?
Yeah. Yeah, I love
How do
it. I
you
love the setup,
how do
and
you
I
deal with
love
that?
it. Sure, and I love the shout out to my mentor, sister, friend, Yolanda Ruiz. She, in many ways, is the reason that I'm here, because she interrupted my understanding of what the role of a teacher was. She helped me
Yes.
understand that at our very best, not only is the goal education, our very best is to interrupt the status quo, which, to your point, Kwame, is incredibly difficult. And if you are doing that in ways that are really loving and just and liberatory, you are going to find yourself in direct opposition to the system that employs you. Everyone has said this, from Gloria Latson-Billings to Bettina Love to Yolanda Ruiz to Chris Emden to Goldie Muhammad. I mean, everyone is saying if you're doing this liberatory thing right, you're going to find yourself in opposition, to your point, and that is fear inducing. That is terrifying to understand that you could lose a lot. So in choosing to interrupt the things and the ideas that threaten the humanity of your students, the fear is going to arise because it's supposed to. And to go back to my earlier point about being human, that contradiction is a part of being human. So the love can live alongside the fear. And in many ways, not that they're cousins or friends or anything like that, but there is a connection between love and fear. And my hope, and what I say in the book, is in moments where you are afraid of losing your job, where you are afraid of getting in trouble, where you are afraid of making mistakes, where you're afraid of getting it wrong, even in the presence of fear, I'm saying in my book, here is how we choose love. Here is how we interrupt the threats to our students' humanity anyway, because we love them enough and we understand the love that, shout out to Bell Hooks, moves us to act, and it moves us to nurture the growth of the people we love and ourselves. And so if we are loving, we're going to find ourselves in places where we are also afraid. And that is okay. That's human. It's logical. It's rational. It makes a lot of sense. And it's grounded in the reality that we have seen. I know you and I have seen a lot of teachers do incredible work and have been punished for it. They've been fired for it. They've been persecuted for it. And my point is, that is what this cycle of socialization is supposed to do. Reward you when you follow it and punish you when you don't. And what I'm saying to teachers who want to be loving and liberatory is interrupt anyway. The fear is going to be there, but don't follow it. Acknowledge it. Acknowledge the fear. Acknowledge the nerves and the anxiety, but then acknowledge the love you have for yourself and for young people and their communities. And you've got to do the right thing. And so in the book, I have this beautiful story about a white educator who approached me, and he and I had a heart-to-heart and a back and forth. And at the end of it, because he was saying, this cost a lot. Equity cost a lot. Interruption cost a lot. And I'm afraid. And I said, to quote Viola Davis, if you are committed to equity, let it cost you something. Let it cost you something. Put something on the line, as Bettina Love would say. So yes, there will be loss. Yes, there will be conflict. That's expected, and that's okay. And I'm asking us to choose love anyway, because it is what we deserve. It's what young folks deserve. Let love be our guide, not fear.
And that's powerful. And when you say that, it goes back to what you said about self-regard.
Yeah.
And I think as educators, we go into this profession without having that.
That's exactly right.
self-regard, but also the self-efficacy as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
Not realizing how influential our voice is, how
Yeah.
influential our presence is,
Yeah.
and underestimating, undervaluing the power that we have to make these shifts and to
Sure.
make these changes happen.
Sure.
So I would say if more of us understood that power that we already possess, we've
Mm.
always possessed it, we'd be more bold in terms of saying,
Yeah.
you know what, I don't need this job. You know, I have enough faith in my abilities, and I know that I could be
Yeah.
an asset
Sure.
in any space that I find myself in that involves children.
That's right.
That I'll bounce back. And even if it's not in a brick and mortar, I'm gonna find a different way. And I
That's
think
right.
a perfect example of that, I don't know if you know the brother, Ernest Krim the third.
I don't, but tell me. Teach
Ernest
me
Krim
something.
the third. So if you don't know him, you need to look him up. So Ernest, who's been on the podcast, he was a social studies and history teacher in Joliet. So it's a town just outside Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And he is someone who is an expert in Black history, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he was going through a lot of the same challenges, you know, being in a system that he knows
Yeah.
was very much anti-Black in more ways than one.
Sure.
But you find ways to interrupt within. At
Sure.
least you try to. And when he realized that it was difficult, he said, all right, you know what? I'm going to still keep educating.
Sure.
So, of course, using social media as a vehicle to do that. He also wrote a book about how Black history saved his life, which is a
Mm-hmm.
phenomenal book. I recommend that. And he's been able to pivot from the classroom into creating his own classroom virtually. So now he does speaking engagements and all these things, but it's all because of the fact that he found a way to stand his ground. He left the system,
Mm-hmm.
but guess what? The purpose stayed intact
Mm-hmm.
because he had the self regard and he also had the self efficacy to realize, oh, you know what? I don't need this system.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I can do this in a different way that's going to mitigate the harm that I was experiencing while I was within this
Yes.
system.
Yes. 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 And that speaks to me about being loyal to the work, not loyal to the system. Loyal to the
Mm,
work of teaching and learning, committed to communities, committed to liberation, loyal to liberation, but not committed or loyal to schools. And when you shift that loyalty and that commitment to the work and to liberation and to justice, it frees you from the fear of losing access to a system. It frees you from the fear of losing your job. Cool, I can lose
mm,
a job, but I can still do the work. And I think to your point about self-regard, once you have that healthy sense of self-regard, it becomes easier and easier to say no to a system so you can say yes to a people. And I really do encourage us to move our loyalty and our commitment to people, y'all, to humans, not to systems, not to schools, not to curricula even. We to back to your point about having the students tell us if we're doing a good job in evaluation, that's who I'm responsible to, not the school, not the
mhm.
principal, not the administration. I'm responsible to young people. I'm responsible to my
That's right.
students. That's who I answer to. That's who I care the most about their evaluations of me, their assessments of me, and their thoughts on my class, because that is why I am there. And I don't know, to your point, if we emphasize the importance of student voice enough in the ways that we evaluate and assess our work. And so students can say this class was horrible and terrible, but if the administrator comes in and says, this is great, well, then you can stay in the building, even though you are spirit murdering, to quote Bettina Love, even though you are spirit murdering Black and brown kids every day, you can still keep your job. And if we shift our responsibility in the kinds of students telling you that they're experiencing you in a way that's violent should shake you up. It should wake you up. But if it doesn't, it means you're not committed to them or responsible to them. You're committed to the schoolhouse.
Mm. Yes, all that. all that. And I want to go ahead and pivot because I want to make sure we spend some time talking about your international experience
Sure.
because on this podcast, we have a conglomerate of international educators who tune in every single week. Shout out to them from all over the globe. And you were fortunate enough to spend a lot of time in South America,
Sure.
Argentina, Uruguay, DR,
Yeah.
Mexico, and the list
Yeah.
goes on and on.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to just share how that experience living in those countries and even teaching in some of those countries internationally has allowed you to shape your perspective on
Yes.
humanity. It
Sure.
had to have done that.
Oh, it did. It did for sure. And if I think about humanity in the way that I talked about before, as
Yes.
this complicated thing, what living abroad and teaching abroad revealed to me is there are almost, let me see here, 8 billion people on Earth, right? I think we're getting close to 8 billion, if not a little bit over it. After traveling and living in all those places, I realized there are 8 billion ways to be human. And there are
Mm,
8 billion ways to teach. And by having the opportunity that I'm grateful for of being able to live and teach alongside other people internationally, I learned that we are not always right. That the stuff that
mhm.
I learned in that school in Oklahoma City is not everything. I learned how limited our perspectives are. Not always wrong, but limited. And that the only way to understand our collective humanity or to understand the best ways to do education is to expose yourself to as many of those 8 billion ways of living and teaching possible. And so for me, traveling allowed me to do that. It allowed me to wake up and unlearn the exaggerated importance of the United States. I think we are taught here that we are number one. We are taught a kind of supremacy. We are taught a kind of patriotism that puts other nations and other countries down. By traveling,
Yeah.
and I realized, wait a minute, the U.S. perspective is just one. The U.S. way of teaching is just one. The U.S. way of living is just one. And there are so many other ways to do this thing. And I would say that for me, the best way to do this thing is to take a little bit from there and there and there and there. And so every time I travel and I get the chance to engage with other teachers and other humans, I get better as a human and as a teacher because I've just seen another one of those 8 billion ways. And it also allows me to understand that we need each other and that it actually, none of us should be supreme or want to be supreme or feel supreme, that it's just one idea that has limitations. And the only way to understand the fullness or the complexities or the nuances of who we are is to talk to all 8 billion people. But that's not possible, but it is possible for some of us to travel and to expose ourselves to those other ways of doing things. And so that is what living and teaching abroad has done for me. And I'm grateful. I understand it as a privilege. I understand how many people from where I'm from don't have the opportunity to do so. And so a part of my responsibility is, because I was able, thanks to the community holding me up, is to bring back some of the knowledge. It is to bring back the things that I learned to people who, for a range of reasons, aren't able to go. And so it woke me up, Kwame, man. It helped me realize we're not everything. We're not everything. We are just one drop in a huge pond that is Earth, with a ton of people who know a lot of stuff about being human, about love, about justice, about liberation, and about schools.
Yes. And I think living abroad allows you to really understand these three P's: privilege, power, and positionality.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
those have been the biggest lessons I've learned being abroad and understanding how the intersectionality
Sure.
of who you are, right, has an impact on how you move in these spaces and how people
Yeah.
perceive you,
That's right.
right? Um, when we think about it in the context of the United States, we think about the racism that we deal with. Some of us may think about the sexism that we deal with. Some might think about the transphobia, the homophobia, and then other forms of discrimination. But then you go into this different space, some of those things aren't as prevalent. Some of
That's
those
right.
things don't even show up. it's amazing how
Yeah.
that perspective just shifts.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, as somebody who has taught abroad and has taught within the States and has dealt with so many different students from different walks of life,
Yeah.
how has that ability to unpack your own identity allowed you to increase your awareness of the intersections of other people's identities?
Sure, sure. And so for me, unpacking or doing, to Yolanda's work of archaeology of self, was
Yes.
the only way, Kwame, that I could even get close to understanding the humanity of other people. The first thing I had to understand is I have been socialized. I have
Mm.
learned some stuff about myself and other people that isn't accurate and that serves a purpose. And so I had to sit with myself, do my archaeological digging, as Yolanda would say, do my excavation, as Yolanda would
Deep
say, and
excavation.
really
Yep.
figure out, whoa, where are the biases and prejudices and isms and obias within myself? Where do they live within me? And once I understood how complicated I was, how contradictory I was, how nuanced I was, it became impossible to not see that same complicated humanity in everybody else. And so the
Mm.
more I got to understand myself, the more I got to understand other people and other humans. And so I do think that is work that is we don't spend enough time on. We don't talk about the self enough, where it's always you, other people, this person and that person. I'm like, but hold on, pause. You also have a racial identity. You also have a gender identity. You also have a class identity, a social identity, etc. Any of us who live in a society have been ascribed identities. Some of us choose them because of where we belong, but you have them. And the better you can understand those, the better you can understand young people, for example, who come to our classrooms with all kinds of identities. But if you keep acting like you don't have a race, talking about you don't see color or you don't have a gender, etc., it's going to be really, really hard for you to understand how to collaborate with young people to navigate their challenges. And so I had to understand myself as a cisgender person so I can understand what it meant to be in community with people of trans experience. And that
Mhm.
was some of the work that I had to do and that all of us have to do. And so once you see yourself as a full human and you see all your pieces that are contradictory, you must see that within other people. And it allows you to extend yourself and other humans more grace, more compassion, and it gets us to a place where we're able to also express and practice empathy. And that empathy and that kindness and that grace, I believe, is what is going to allow us to work together to move toward the world we all deserve.
Amen to that. So before I let you go, we have to make sure that we talk about the book.
Sure.
Humans Who Teach
Gotta
is
talk
the
about
main
it.
reason why we're here today. So let me go ahead and share this with folks who are watching on YouTube so they can see what the book looks like. So, in case people want to get a copy, here it is, y'all. So, here's what we got here. Beautiful cover.
Thank you.
Uh, you know what? I think if you're an AKA, you'll appreciate the cover.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. I was like, wow, they're gonna have a field day with this one.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to get you. I'm trying to get you some sales, bro.
I love it. Listen, yeah, yes, I love it. The first and the finest, please.
Yes. But just in thinking about the conversation we've had over the past 50 plus minutes, some of the things you've experienced. I mean, I know in in a previous podcast, first off, it was Leading Equity podcast. Shout out to Sheldon
That's right. Shout out
Akins.
to
That's
Sheldon.
my guy. Had a chance to get on there too. Um, you mentioned your sister's death, how you came
Yeah,
into work
yeah,
after finding out about her passing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, and then you talk about just your experiences being a black queer man and all these things that have happened in your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
All those things had to play a role in you being able to write this book, which I'm sure was an emotional roller coaster. So I'd like for you to just share with the audience, what were some of those ups and downs of writing a book like this?
Yeah,
Because there are points where I know it had to be highly personal, but in
sure.
order for you to get this book to what it is, you had to go deep.
That's right. That's right.
Had to be
So
vulnerable.
this book, writing this book, to your point, was a journey because it was a book of healing. And it was
Yeah.
a book of not only thinking about my own healing, but also trying to extend the opportunity to heal to every other human who teaches. And what I learned about healing and about writing is it's not linear. It is not linear. It is circuitous, and it is like a winding maze, and it's this way
Yeah.
and that way, and it is a journey. And so when I think about that moment you brought up around the tragedy of my sister, and I think about teaching, and I think about the book, that there's the connection. It is a complete contradiction. And so writing the book was not linear. I was supposed to write this book in 2020, and I started writing it, and for whatever reason, Kwame, something told me to stop. Something told me
Mm,
I weren't ready. Something told me I hadn't had some kind of experience. And then another voice said, "You're not healed enough." And so I
mm,
did a podcast instead called Water for Teachers, where I explored some of those ideas. That was the first book title, by the way, Water for Teachers. I gave it to the podcast. And then 2 years later, the book and healing found me again, and then I continued. And so my journey toward writing the book, and when as I think about creativity, is I had to learn the very hard lesson of being patient and being open and beholden to my creativity and my imagination, and not trying to force things that weren't there, and letting the ideas take time to marinate, man. Letting
come on.
the love build, letting the love grow and get out of the way, and tell myself the book will come out when it's supposed to come out in the way that it's supposed to come out. And I have to surrender to that. And Toni Morrison talks about that, right? If you surrender to the air, you could ride it. That was a really hard lesson for me to get out of the way of the book, because I was forcing it. I was like, nah, these words are going to come out. This book is going to come out. And I wasn't ready. There were so many journeys I had to go on because the book is so personal. And it was a hard book to get through and to get out, because it required every part of my humanity, which means I had to wait. And so I'm
Mm,
grateful now that the book is out, and I actually believe, it was supposed to be right now. As I think about the ideas I take up and the questions I take up, they make a lot of sense right now as we think about COVID-19 and beyond than that perhaps they would have meant if I had put that book out when I was trying to force it back in 2020. It needed its time. My creativity and my imagination needed their time. And my job really was to get out of the way and wait and be patient and to sit still and to be fully present. That was what the writing the book felt like to me. It was lessons in patience, lessons in healing, and lessons in full presence and sitting still in a
mm.
world that tells me go, 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 right, 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 right. This book said, chill, chill.
Yeah. You know what? It sounds like my writing journey. So I just finished writing my book. Just submit it for
Congrats,
production.
man.
Thank you so much. And I'll talk to you more about that off air. But man,
Yeah.
same journey, many lessons learned. But I want to end with this question: how does Dr. Shamari K.Reid stay true to the teacher in him?
Following my own voice.
Mm,
As I talk about across the book, figuring out a healthy sense of self-regard. And once I started to trust my voice and value my voice and realize what my authentic voice was, it became really easy to stay authentic to my true teaching self, teaching identity. Is because when I go to bed at night, I'm asking, can I sleep with? Am I okay with the choices I made? And that allows me to be true to myself and not true to what everybody else wants me to be, wants me to be
mm,
as a human and wants me to be as a teacher. I am now responding to what Shamari wants to be and what he needs to become. And that is hard. That was hard work. That's ongoing work. But once again, it is about self-regard, man. It is about honoring the way you feel about yourself. And I don't care if a lot of other people, I don't care about other people's ideas or expectations of me. I care about what I think of myself. That's what matters most to me. And of course, I care about young people and of course, Black people, but I care what I think. I care
That's
how
right.
I feel. And as long as I hold on to that and I privilege and prioritize that, I will always be in alignment with my passion and my purpose. But the minute I start letting the ways of the world tell me who to be, how to write, how to speak, how to move, I will find myself out of alignment. And so I stay aligned with that true teaching self by staying aligned with who I actually know myself to be and not letting anybody else's voice come in and interrupt that to tell me who I should be. Only I know that.
Yes. And there it is, y'all. And this is a great way to end this conversation. Shamari, thank you so much. This is probably my favorite episode I've recorded in a long time.
Wow. Thank you,
And
man.
I'm not just saying it. Like everything about this conversation was just so smooth and so organic. So this is definitely, this has to be a top 10 for me. Has to be a top
Wow.
10. This
Wow.
was such a
Thank
beautiful conversation. So I appreciate you for being vulnerable. I appreciate you for sharing your story. And before I let you go, please make sure you let people know how they can connect with you
Sure.
so they can get a copy of the book, but also talk
Yeah.
to you about the book through social media.
That's right. And so my name on all platforms, whether it's Twitter or X, formerly Twitter, or Instagram, is just my first name, my last name, my middle initial. So Shamari K.Reid, SHAMARIKREID. You can find me on all platforms. And to that point, I would love to talk. I tweet back, I post back, I respond, I retweet, I respond to DMs. Let's keep having this conversation about our complicated humanity and love.
Come on, y'all. Make sure y'all get this copy. Let's make this book a bestseller. Let's make it a bestseller. Let's make a New York Times bestseller. You know
Yes,
what I mean? If
sir.
we
Yes,
can
sir.
get it, let's manifest that,
That's
right? But thank you. Thank you again. And man, we're gonna have to find some time to talk, man. There's so much stuff we gotta dig into.
Let's find
Uh,
some time.
yes, sir. All right, my friend. You have a good rest of the day.
You too. Thank you.
All right, y'all. So we're about to end another fantastic episode of Identity Talk for Educators Live. And as always, wish you all good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. And we're going to do this again another time. Peace out, y'all.